Hello, and this will be a shorter entry for the Sci-Fi and Philosophy playlist. I may say very little about Confucius or Aristotle in this video, but I am talking about culture and history and religion and art and zombies and where else do all of those things meet if not philosophy. So I'll be mostly following my post on Ricochet on the subject. And what I want to talk about is the new Resident Evil series on Netflix, compared and contrasted with Valley of the Dead on Netflix. There's a lot of stuff critiquing the new Resident Evil series on YouTube, I find, and that's all well and good. I want to suggest an alternative. That's one reason for this video. I want to suggest an alternative for those who like zombie film and have Netflix. Skip the new Resident Evil series, but there is something else on Netflix that I can recommend. I can recommend Valley of the Dead, a new Spanish zombie film. So in my Ricochet post, I comment on how, yes, the new good zombie movie is from Spain. The last great zombie movie was Train to Busan, and the Americans just aren't making the great zombie fiction these days. The Japanese are the ones making the good Resident Evil television, not American Netflix. Now, let me hasten to qualify. I'm not an expert. There's probably a zillion zombie movies I haven't seen, and we should probably keep it that way. My wife probably thinks I watch too much zombie fiction, and there's a very, very good chance she is correct. So speaking of not watching too much zombie fiction, let's talk about Resident Evil. And be warned, there are spoilers for the new Resident Evil series, as well as for Valley of the Dead. In particular, if you take my advice and you don't like spoilers, don't watch this video after I start talking about Valley of the Dead. Spoilers for the new Resident Evil series don't matter nearly as much because that series doesn't matter nearly as much. Okay, so it's a live action series. It's on Netflix. It's one season of 8 episodes. I don't know if it will be renewed. We can hope for the best, which in this case would probably be the least. Let me also state that I've never played the games. I haven't seen all the films. There's a lot I do not know or understand about the Resident Evil. I guess the best word is franchise. There's a lot I don't understand about the Resident Evil franchise. Here's something I do understand. There is not just one Resident Evil story. There may actually be 4 Resident Evil stories. I think the new movie, I haven't seen, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, is possibly a different storyline from all the others. But what I have been able to keep track of to some extent is there's Resident Evil Storyline 1, which is in the games. It's continued or expanded in a Japanese animated film series and also in a Japanese TV show that I found on Netflix called Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. So Resident Evil Infinite Darkness is not to be confused with Resident Evil, even if you do find that both of them are television shows on Netflix. One is animated, one is not. One is in Storyline 1, the storyline from the games. The other is totally different. One's from Japan, one's from America. Storyline 2 is the one in the 6-film series featuring a zombie apocalypse, featuring Alice, who sometimes has superpowers and kills a lot of zombies. And she's at war with the Umbrella Corporation, which is the evil corporation that made the zombies, basically. Then there's Resident Evil Storyline 3, I'm calling it, which is the one in the new Netflix series, Resident Evil. So totally different story, or at least mostly different story, maybe totally different story from the one from the games, and also the one from the films, which was in itself different from the one in the games. All right. Second thing second, that was first things first. Now, second thing second, I do want to give the show some credit for some of its merits. I mentioned 2 here in this paragraph. First, Lance Reddick deserves a lot of credit for doing good work. I think he does very good work with the show. Lance Reddick is a very good actor. He earned my undying respect in Fringe. And I think highly of him. I think he does good work with the show. And don't blame anything bad with the show on him. Rather, credit him with much of what is indeed good about the show. Another thing about this show, you could watch this show and get some very edifying reflections about cloning, surrogate motherhood, technologies that alter human nature for the benefit of the powers that be, which reminds me again, of course, this would come up eventually. I said I wouldn't talk much about philosophy, but of course Kant would come up. Of course Kant would come up. This is a great show, actually, for thinking through the horrors. It's a horror story. This is a good show for thinking through the literal horrors of using other people as merely a means to your own end. You shouldn't do that. this show is a very Kantian show in that respect, and that is to its credit. Also, C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man. You could do some Kant, you could do some C.S. Lewis, and you could watch the show, and it could be beneficial. You could mine this show for gold. The issue, though, is, of course, why dig through poop to get to the gold when you could just eat through chocolate to get to the gold by reading Kant, by reading The Abolition of Man, or by watching sci-fi that's a better story, better told to get to the gold. Speaking of which, I wasn't going to mention this, but why not? I edited the book, Science Fiction and the Abolition of Man, Finding C.S. Lewis. I typed it with some typos, but this should work. Science Fiction and the Abolition of Man, Finding C.S. Lewis in Sci-Fi Film and Television. This, from 2016, now 6 years ago, is a good book introducing gold. You can eat through chocolate to get to, rather than digging through poop, by looking at good sci-fi to find all the C.S. Lewis and stuff. All right, now let's get closer to the point. I think I hate this series. I quit after the 3rd episode. It's unlikely I shall return. The term torture porn came to mind, but I don't think it's torture porn. It's something else. Maybe it's despair porn. It's just so dark with very little of anything else. Now let me do a quick contrast with Stranger Things. Stranger Things can be very, very dark. But in Stranger Things, there's some light that's easy to find. There are friends, there are family you can fight for in that world. Maybe you can even hope to win. All the heroes of Stranger Things are deeply flawed people. They are, well, using more religious terminology, they are dirty, rotten sinners. These people need Jesus, but there's enough light there. There's enough good in them. And lots of them are spending a lot of time getting better. Characters grow, and there's hope for the struggle being worth it in the end in Stranger Things. Also, Stranger Things is just one thing the Resident Evil series on Netflix isn't. It's a good story. Stranger Things is a good story, well told. I'm not getting that at all with Resident Evil, at least the first 3 episodes. Now, it's hard for me to explain why I don't think this show is a good story. It's not that easy for me to point out aspects of the story that are bad. I just don't notice a lot of aspects that are good, unlike Stranger Things, where there's just endless aspects that are good. The best way I could put it is maybe this. The new Resident Evil series on Netflix just leaves me with the impression that someone wanted to take a basic Resident Evil premise, namely the Umbrella Corporations make zombies in a place called Raccoon City, and then squeeze as much darkness and misery as you possibly can out of that concept. So a couple of comparisons might be appropriate now, comparing Resident Evil to Resident Evil storyline 1 to storyline 3, or storyline 2 to storyline 3. The 6-film saga of Alice in the earlier film series was incredibly ridiculous. It was not fully coherent. It was also pretty fun. The makers of Resident Evil Apocalypse probably will never be able to explain how exactly Alice knew when to drive her motorcycle into a church through the stained glass window, acrobat her way off of it, and shoot the fuel tanks or whatever it was she did to make it blow up, to hurt the monsters and rescue the other characters who were in the church at the time. How did she know they were in the church? How did she know where to jump? How did she know where to crash the motorcycle? How did she know it would blow up so as to hurt the monsters and not the innocent people there? It was absurd, but it was fun. It was a thoroughly ridiculous moment, and it was a fun moment. These were films where you felt like they were exciting zombie fights with rock music waiting around every corner. The new Netflix Resident Evil doesn't bother with zombie fights and rock music. They don't do fun in this series. Instead, we just see horrible monsters, or Umbrella, but I repeat myself, gruesomely killing off all the side characters, while the heroine Jade runs around and survives somehow, rarely even fighting. The music that sticks in our memory is some ridiculous pop music wrapped around teen girl drama, which is exaggerated by some dark origin story about cloning. There's nothing fun about this. You can compare this to the Japanese film series and its companion animated series, Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. And if you're hearing it here first, and you heard it here first, Resident Evil on Netflix and Resident Evil Infinite Darkness on Netflix should switch names. The Japanese animated films can be very dark, and Infinite Darkness is indeed very dark. There's a lot more light there than in this Resident Evil series. If I'm not mistaken, nothing from Resident Evil Storyline 1 tells us of Umbrella actually destroying the world. There is no zombie apocalypse in Resident Evil Storyline 1. Zombie outbreaks happen. Biotech that alters human beings happens. It makes monsters. But the good people fight it. Threat after threat is actually contained. There's actually hope for a future. And the good people are true heroes. Leon Kennedy is a light shining in a dark place, as are Claire Redfield, Rebecca Chambers, Chris Redfield. I hope I got all those names right. In one film, Resident Evil Damnation, which could be terribly dark, there is a magnificent light at the end of the film. Leon Kennedy, the hero, is lost an unlikely friend to the monsters. And then he makes a new friend out of an enemy. He shoots the parasite right out of the guy's body. This leaves the guy paralyzed, but it saves his life and it saves his soul. The guy's last appearance in a wheelchair is his return to his pre-war life. He's teaching kids. He's going to school to work at his old job before he got into the war and the monster making. He's going back to his old job being a school teacher. Now he's in a wheelchair, but his soul is healed, and he's going back to building a future as a school teacher, and it's a beautiful scene. Jade, in the new Resident Evil series, is sort of a hero, but she just doesn't have the nobility of Leon, Chris, Rebecca, Claire, and then there's the fun. I saw Resident Evil Vendetta on an airplane, and then some sort of Boeing, I guess technically the word is jet, some sort of Boeing 777, I believe, and then later watched it again on Netflix when it turned up on Netflix. And there's this one scene where Leon and Chris Redfield work together to shoot up a small army of zombies. Watching them work is a true pleasure. It's like watching a perfectly choreographed sword fight or kung fu battle or something. Not any less fun because it was animated. There was no fun like that in the new series. Here, if you care about spoilers, stop. Don't keep going. If you like zombies and you care about spoilers and you have access to Netflix, don't watch anything else on Valley of the Dead, the alternative zombie story I'm recommending. Valley of the Dead has fun. There's this scene where Anon takes out some zombies with a shotgun. That's fun. There's this scene where two guys from opposite sides of the Spanish Civil War are locked in a truck waiting for the zombies to break in. And how terribly convenient they notice some explosives. They notice a box of explosives in the truck behind them. One guy pulls a stick of dynamite out of his pocket. The other guy's got a lit cigarette. So what do? The zombies are going to eat you in a matter of seconds. Obviously, you use the lit cigarette, the stick of dynamite, and the box of explosives. You go down in a blaze of glory and you take a small zombie army with you. That's actually a fun moment in film. And it's surprisingly hopeful for people who are getting themselves blown up along with an army of zombies. Their last words were something like this. One guy says, "Long live Spain." The other guy says, "Wait, which one? Yours or mine?" And the first guy says, "Whichever one survives all this." It turns out that in the story, Valley of the Dead, the communist team in the Spanish Civil War is in league with the Soviet Russians, and they're developing a zombie formula. Meanwhile, the Nazis, working with the fascist team, are developing a zombie formula, and they developed it first. So which side did survive? Well, add a little more time, look at how the world is now, and you find neither side survived, but Spain did, and it's better off than it was then, and there aren't even any zombies. Our present moment in the real world provides some perspectives on the fictional deaths of these characters. While they're fighting a common enemy in zombies, they have a common love of their homeland, which led to good. It led to good results in the end. I won't say that Valley of the Dead is a great movie. I don't think it was trying to be, though. It doesn't take itself too seriously, unlike the new Resident Evil series. Its only goal was to imagine Nazis making zombies during the Spanish Civil War, and some people from both sides of the Spanish Civil War team up to fight the zombies. A ridiculous, wonderful premise for a fun, somewhat ridiculous movie. It could be a semi-serious drama action film that's pretty fun, which is what happened. The alternative was to just go full Sharknado, or more to the point with the same genre, full zombie tidal wave, which I did see. And Zombie Tidal Wave was a terrible movie, but it was actually kind of fun. So how did Valley of the Dead make a good film? Here's my totally non-professional, not an expert in film commentary. Valley of the Dead was a fun film because The film wasn't taking itself too seriously, but it took storytelling seriously. It didn't do anything brilliant or original. What it did was use reliable, tried and true methods for telling a good story. They made good use of the grizzled sergeant, the unlikely allies team up to destroy a common enemy theme. They made good use of the lovable rogue who steps up to the challenge and becomes a hero. They had some playful romance, no sex, at least not on screen. Oh, and they had a good use of natural location. There's a valley in Spain, there's a river, there's trees, there's sunlight. And that sunlight is where I want to start wrapping things up. The lighting is a contrast to the new Resident Evil series. There are other dark, fancy shows that try too hard and that, like Resident Evil, just don't do natural light. In the Resident Evil show and in some other things, although I'm honestly having trouble remembering exactly where else I've seen this, but I think I've seen this in several other shows that I think are too dark and take themselves too seriously. Maybe Helix. I shouldn't have admitted I ever watched Helix. Or I don't know, maybe I'm even thinking of some of the Resident Evil films with Alice, whatever. There are some dark, fancy film productions that try too hard and don't do natural light. You've probably seen it somewhere if you're into this genre at all. In Resident Evil, the new Netflix series, we have zombie apocalypse rubblescapes. We have tunnels with, of course, monsters in them. Or we have ridiculously clean modern buildings with clean glass walls and white rooms, and all the lighting is fluorescent, and it's not even fun to look at. Now, I don't think it was meant to be fun to look at. It's part of the strategy of displaying displaying a dangerous use of technology, a bad use of technology. The uncomfortable, overdone fluorescent lighting is part of how the uncomfortably overdone fluorescent lighting is an image of the theme of the story, which is that we use technology to cause some real trouble. We use technology and we use it badly. So, closing things up, there actually is a lesson there, and both of our new zombie film projects come together. Again, Resident Evil on Netflix is not without its merits. And you can mine it for some real gold if you enjoy that kind of fiction at all. When people get a God complex and try to remake the world, they often end up banishing the world made by the actual God. They end up with their own man-made hellscape. There's a nun in Valley of the Dead who observes that these zombies, these dead people walking around, this isn't a biblical resurrection. The only thing the Walking Dead have to do with God is that someone is trying to be God. Valley of the Dead has some prominent Muslim and Catholic characters. Certainly not everyone's religious, but it has some prominent Catholic characters, actually just one prominent Muslim character. And it also honors Spain and the beauty of the world we have with its nice shots of the valley, the river, etc. Valley of the Dead displays human beings and the world they live in for what they are. They're flawed. They're in dire need of improvement, and the humans won't stop cussing. A lot of F words in the subtitles, not a movie for kids, really. Resident Evil, the TV show, portrays a nightmarish and largely, if not entirely, hopeless portrayal of the use of technology to redesign humanity according to the whims of the most selfish among us. And that, again, could be construed as one of the merits of the show. It does a good job displaying evil as utterly evil. Resident Evil, and it's truly evil. If you want a show that shows evil as truly evil, and that's your criterion for a good show, Resident Evil, the new Netflix series, certainly has its merits. I just don't think it's as well done a show, but also it's not as fun. And also, I want some light with my criticism of the darkness. I want some light, and Valley of the Dead portrays a better way. It has a hint of the light. It suggests we do better to stick with the God we have, enjoy the world we've been given by God and by our ancestors, and try to make it better, not through these weird technologies that redesign humanity according to the whims of the most selfish among us, but try to make the world better through the more reliable means of love, courage, and self-sacrifice. That is what Valley of the Dead portrays, and I recommend that movie. I do not recommend the new Resident Evil series on Netflix. Well, thanks for watching.